On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, Nick Nurse has been fired. We know that, but now our eyes turn towards the Raptors front office. Do they got the juice to pull the Raptors out of the mess they seem to find themselves in? We'll dig into that. Plus, Fact or Fiction will play that wonderful parlor game that everybody loves regarding Masai Ujiri's end-of-season press conference. We'll do it all with Vivek Jacob of Raptors.com. Let's get to it. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1387, I'm pretty sure, of Locked On Raptors for Monday, April the 24th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can follow the show on Instagram, Locked On Raptors. You can also go to Discord. Follow the link in the description. Just go click through that link and join our wonderful Locked On Raptors Discord community. I'm in there. Vivek Jacob's in there. 40 other people are in there. We're talking about fake trades and draft guys and more fake trades and the Blue Jays and very soon Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's all going to be great. Jump on into the Locked On Raptors Discord right now. We love you very much. Also love you if you subscribe to the podcast for free, and especially love you if you are an everyday listener of the podcast. Shout out to the everydayers. If you are an everyday listener of the show, let us know. Jump into the comments and give us a shout, and I will give you a shout in return down the line. Thank you so much for being a big part of the show, keeping us going every day. All right, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. More on them and their daily fantasy sports fun times a little later on in the show. All right, let's get to it. Nick Nurse, still fired. That hasn't changed since everything broke on Friday. This is just the second time I'll be speaking on a microphone since the Nick Nurse decision. And joining me for the first time since it all went down is our pal Vivek Jacob, who was there in the building on Friday as Masai Ujiri addressed the masses, or the small collection of media who were gathered at OVO Center. And I'm sure you got takeaways, Big V. It's big news for the Toronto Raptors. Big shift. We'll talk about the front office. We're going to play around a fact or fiction from Masai's press conference as well, which we'll explain a little later on. But you're sort of overall now had a couple days to think about it. Where are you at with the Nick Nurse decision? Are you feeling any sort of way about it? And we'll dive into the front office stuff in a second here. But just the decision to move on from Nick Nurse, how you feeling about it right now? Now 72 hours or so out from the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something that was necessary. And when you look at how much Masai spoke about culture and it needed a reset, I think when you look at the players, I think Masai and Bobby and the rest of them have a lot of belief in the core. And so they probably want to see how that plays out with a different voice and maybe more structure to their play before they decide on which players fit and which players don't. And so in any sport, any team sport, it's a lot easier to get rid of one coach than a bunch of players. So I think that was the logical conclusion. Obviously, we're seeing some of the stuff that gets leaked out now post him being relieved of his duties, and they're not great. So, yeah, I think it was just a logical decision, logical conclusion.
Yeah, I feel even better about the decision a couple of days out from it now. I feel like I can breathe a little bit, not having to sort of grapple with the conundrum of culture versus on-court tactician and what do the Raptors need. I just think it felt like it was time for everybody to move on, and that's perfectly all right. Let's dig into the front office, shall we? We're going to talk about Masai and a lot of his statements from his press conference in particular in direct quote form a little later on when we play Fact or Fiction, but my thing now with the front office is, like, I'm not one of these people who's, like, out for blood for Masai Ujiri or Bobby Webster or anyone in the front office. Like, I think in general we're way too quick to want to get rid of executives, and patience is vastly underrated as just a thing that sports teams can exercise. And so I'm not like, you got to go and change the front office. They've lost their fastball. It's broken now. That said, they've kind of played their last
80 games. I want my pound of flesh.
Much like Masai Ujiri, none of us liked watching that basketball team all that much, huh? But for me, this does feel, as much as I'm not ready for the front office to go get canned or anything like that, I do feel like you fire your coach. That's one of the last cards you can play before the heat starts to get turned up on your seat. And that's not to say that MLSE is going to really care what the fan base or the media thinks about the front office. They're going to make their own decisions in their own process, and that's a good thing. They shouldn't listen to us. However, it's not long from now where that I think we could really start to see a lot of doubt, as much as there already is some creeping in now. In particular, if the Raptors don't thread the needle this offseason, if they get the wrong hire coaching wise, if they have any sort of issue with their 3 pending free agents and not doing what they want with those guys and losing them for nothing, or turning them into subpar sign and trade acquisitions, whatever it might be, then I really think there's room to start to ask some serious questions. Where are you at with the front office? How hot should their seat be? And what kind of influence is what's going to happen this summer going to have, do you think, on their long-term stability with the franchise?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. They absolutely have to thread the needle. I think the second they traded for Jakob Poeltl, it was like, okay, now you have to have an absolutely perfect offseason to get this right. And I think most of us agree that moving on from Nick Nurse can only be the first domino. Like, if that is the only thing that changes between now and September, then I would be very skeptical of how they view this team. I'm a little skeptical of it already. We've discussed some of that, but I think that would ring the alarm bells for sure in terms of the front office. And so I think it is possible to get things right. I think definitely this is the first step that needed to be taken. And, whether it's another 3 that have to go right, another 4, another 8, that's subjective. But there's definitely, at least another 3 decisions. And then from there, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's credit to them. Some people will take a challenge and run from it. The Raptors front office is like, how do we make this as hard as possible for ourselves?
Yeah.
And then dive on in. And also, let's throw a coaching search into the middle of it all as well. Like, incredible heat check by a front office that, frankly, has been a little cold for a few years. So I appreciate the Terrence Ross levels of unconsciousness when it comes to their front office heat check in here. But,
I mean,
yeah.
I feel like this is more of like a Dylan Brooks heat check. Like, he's missed like 8 in a row, and it's like, yeah, sure. Let's throw another one up from 40 feet.
Oh, Dylan Brooks. As much as I feel like I would love to root for him on my own team, I really hope he's not one of their solutions this offseason. No thanks. It seems like maybe not the thing you want to go invite into your room. Not that they're going to be able to afford him in free agency or anything like that, but you never know. Sign and trades, whatever. Yeah, like the time is now for them to get this right. And look, I don't even think we'll know if they got it right probably till the end of next season. This is the unfortunate part of pro sports. Decisions happen, and then we all want to make the declarative claim as to whether or not it was the right decision, and then we don't actually know for quite some time if it was. But they've got to at least set themselves up on a track to recapture their old magic. And I do think firing Nick Nurse is probably the biggest step in doing that. It just felt like top to bottom, the sort of just the toxicity of the franchise just kind of leaked through every corner of it. And if you take out Nick Nurse, maybe that helps with sort of making things more copacetic. But pressure's on, man. And as much as I don't think MLSE is going to go, hey, everyone's mad, we're going to fire you right now, Toronto's a tough sports town, man. Like the radio folks get their, and the columnists get their teeth into you a little bit, and ask MLSE then if they are comfortable with the status quo when the entire city is breathing down their necks and looking for change and over blood. It's going to be fascinating stuff. We're going to have the entire offseason covered, of course, on the podcast. We'll be digging into all of these decisions, what the right ones, what the wrong ones are, all that good stuff. We're going to come back on the other side, Big V, and we're going to play a wonderful game that you pitched to me, and I eat it up because I love a stupid parlor game, and we're going to play Fact or Fiction, Masai Ujiri end of season press conference edition. We have 4 quotes from Masai's end of season presser. We're going to run through and determine whether they're fact or fiction. Is he telling the truth or fibbing just a wee little bit? We'll get into all that on the next segment here on the show. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about a couple of our dear friends. First up, it is our lovely friends over at Prize Picks, who are making daily fantasy sports fun, easy, and most importantly, very accessible. I'm not someone who wants to think a lot when I'm trying to play daily fantasy sports. I'm not going to go do the research or anything like that. I'm a very casual daily fantasy sports player, but the beautiful thing is you don't have to be a diehard. You don't have to be in the season-long mode of knowing every single player every single day to be good at Prize Picks, because it's very simple. All you're doing is picking 2 to 6 players on a given entry, and whether they will score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, that's all it is. You against the projections. There's no shadow expert putting a team together that you're trying to compete against behind the scenes. That's no fun. It's just you against the projections. And if you get all of your picks right on a 6-player entry, you can win up to 25 times your money on that entry. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's, again, no competing against other people. It's not just basketball either. Yes, the NBA playoffs are going on right now, and basketball is a wonderful thing to play with Prize Picks, but you can do every other sport as well. WNBA is coming up. The WNBA is coming to Toronto in a couple of weeks' time. You can work on your WNBA chops by going daily fantasy sports there. All with Prize Picks. Super easy, super fun. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada and every province except for Ontario. Download the Prize Picks app, go to prizepicks.com, and sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. You put in $100 of your money, $100 of Prize Picks money joins that $100 to hang out in your account. What a deal. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 with Prize Picks. And today's show is also brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, who are, of course, bringing you the Nissan Most Electric Player of the Week. And here's the thing. Raptors ain't playing right now, so we got to sort through some old Raptors who might be having electric times playing for their teams. Let's go with Kawhi Leonard, shall we? It stinks he's hurt right now. That series might be the Clippers if he were healthy, because playoff Kawhi is an absolute cyborg. Either way, he plays with electricity, with brilliant, fierce elegance, all the things that are wrapped up in the 2023 Nissan Ariya. Kawhi Leonard is your Nissan Ariya Electric Player of the Week as we wait for the Raptors to play basketball again in 6 months' time. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin you to your seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, we continue on here. Vivek Jacob, Raptors.com, along as we are playing Fact or Fiction, the brainchild of Big V. Big facts, big fictions over here. Let's dig in. We have 4 quotes from Masai Ujiri's end of season press conference. We're just going to put them up on the screen and talk about whether they're fact or fiction. Big V, let's begin with Jakob Poeltl, shall we? Masai Ujiri was asked about the Jakob Poeltl trade. I think he defended it pretty well, honestly. I agree. Getting good basketball players on your team in exchange for future first-round picks, perfectly fine thing for me as someone who is not like tanking, who is in the business of having good players on your basketball team being a good thing. That said, Masai Ujiri, the money quote from all that was, he said Jakob Poeltl is a top 10 center in the NBA. Fact or fiction, Big V? Jakob Poeltl is in fact a top 10 center in the NBA, or is this some fun spin by Masai Ujiri? Let's get into it. What you think?
Yeah, I think that part is debatable. I mean, if at best he's probably squeaking in at 9 or 10. And so, again, I go back to what we saw in the regular season where, you had several games where he wasn't closing, including the play-in game, which was a must-win scenario until Gary Trent Jr. was just so bad you had no choice. And
Don't remind me, man. Don't remind me.
And so I think things like that, leave it up in the air. When Masai says that he is like a definitive championship piece, I think that's another thing that you look at and say, I don't know if a definitive like championship piece is, going to be in those situations where it's like, yeah, I don't think I can have this guy on the court. So I think those things I question. And so I think, what he gave up in terms of Kem Birch plus a first round pick to get Jakob Poeltl, probably worth the cost. I think, once you move past, like, obviously, like the Jokic's and Embiid's and move even below the category of, say, like a Miles Turner, that's probably where Jakob Poeltl is. And so, it's probably like a tier 3, tier 4 center when you kind of look at it that way. And so, I think he sugarcoated it a little bit. And so I'll ultimately go with fiction.
I like it. I think there's like a way to it's like one of those pictures where you look at it one way and it looks like nothing, and then you kind of spin it upside down and it's like, oh, I see it. There is a way to like tailor an argument to suggest Jakob Poeltl's a top 10 center, and it's like a value-based one, right? Jakob Poeltl, we don't know what he's going to earn in his next contract. All the reporting and speculation suggests like 18 to 20 million or so. And if that's the number he comes in at, I think you could absolutely argue that, like, on a value per dollar provided, Jakob Poeltl would go down as a top 10 center. The on-court impact he has is tremendous. We know the sort of counting stats are probably never going to be there for him on this team just because there's a lot of other mouths to feed. But the way that he clears the way for those mouths to eat, I don't know. It's like that's part of his value as a player as well. And ultimately, I think when you're talking about centers in the league, obviously there's the two elite dudes, Jokic and Embiid. They're kind of in their own tier of their own. After that, I would say you got like Sabonis, Anthony Davis, Bam, Karl Anthony Towns, if he could ever get it together. That's probably like the next tier of like, all right, no question, that's like the tier 2 kind of in the conversation for all NBA on an annual basis type bigs. And then after that, whole mess. DeAndre Ayton, Jared Allen, Brook Lopez, Rudy Gobert, Wendell Carter Jr., Nikola Vucevic, Miles Turner, Jakob Poeltl.
There's no question that Brook Lopez is better than Jakob Poeltl.
Yeah, sure. I think, let me finish my list of players. Jakob Poeltl, Clint Capella, Nick Claxton. That's kind of like the next chunk, I would say. Obviously, some guys are going to be higher towards that third tier than others. Maybe there is just a full-on tier division between the Brook Lopez tier and the Jakob Poeltl tier. I can totally get by that. But I think there's certainly, depending on how you feel about Yak versus Wendell Carter Jr. versus Vooch versus Turner versus Capella versus Claxton, you could absolutely say Yak is near the top of that bunch, which would put him kind of into the bottom tier of the top 10. I ultimately think this is more... It's like we're probably going to get too hung up on this top 10 distinction because we love to get hung up on top whatever distinctions. Is Pascal a top 5 player? Blah, blah, blah. Like, who cares? But with Yak, I do think the whole championship piece part of it, while I think that's probably overstating things a little bit, he is the type of dude who fits on basically any team. And I think that is more sort of the spirit of championship peace, at least the way I read it. It's not like this guy's going to come in and be our Joel Embiid. He's going to drive us to a title. No, this guy can exist on a team that is very serious. And that's kind of what I think is the case with Yak. Ultimately, I'll probably say fiction as well, but I don't think it's like crazy. I don't think Masai's like out to lunch for saying that. And if you're going on a value basis, if he's coming in at $20 million a year, what Jakob Poeltl does at $20 million a year, you will take all day long and be very happy at a position where it's less about do you have the best guy and more do you have a guy that fits outside of the 2 or 3 best guys.
I think to sum up, I would say he can definitely be a top 10 center.
Yeah.
But if he wants to be a top 10 center on this team, the front office is going to have to change some pieces around him. I know the net rating is what it is and all of that, but like, again, you talk about, being able to be on the floor in the fourth quarter and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think, if you have some better shooting threats, I think he becomes a more viable option as well.
Yeah, that's a really well put point. Let's get to factor fiction number 2, shall we? And that is fixing the culture. The Raptors can get the team back on track without major roster moves. I don't know if Masai specifically said this because he did leave the possibility of big roster changes as well. I think it's notable that he didn't do like an impassioned Pascal Siakam defense like he did last year, where he's like, I'd go to war with that guy. I'm not saying that means he's going to go trade Pascal Siakam, but I don't think he put to bed any speculation of anyone on the roster. Like, I feel like anything is on the table right now. That said, it did seem like culture and getting things kind of back, feeling harmonious and getting that Raptors magic back again felt like the biggest impetus for the Nick Nurse decision. I don't think really the X's and O's were even discussed all that much as far as reasons why Nurse was let go. And so it stands to reason that if you're firing Nick Nurse, you think that that can be the thing that fixes the culture. Do you think, fact or fiction, the Raptors can fix themselves and get back on track as a franchise without major roster surgery?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I do think major changes are needed. I do think the core has to be adjusted. And I think there has to be a clear commitment to upgrading the shooting on this roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you watch that Warriors Kings game, and
it's nuts. Everyone can shoot. It's crazy.
And that's the thing. You go down like the playoff rotations of these teams, and it's like, yeah, that's a shooter, that's a shooter, that's a shooter, that's a shooter. And you're not
reading the Cavs roster, I'm presuming right now.
That team accepted. There's a lot of shooting on all these teams, and the Raptors have to figure out a way to I'm going to temporarily include those upcoming free agents to go from just 3 guys in Fred, OG, and Gary, 4 if you want to include Otto Porter Jr., to pretty much double that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure this is
and that's
hard,
not going
right?
to happen in one summer.
No.
Right? But at least a couple more, right? Yeah. That has to happen this summer.
We were actually talking about this in the Locked On Raptors Discord last night. Everyone jump on in, shall we? We were kicking around. There's a little draft channel in there where people will just drop names of people they want me to talk about eventually on the podcast once we turn to draft mode. And there was a suggestion of Bilal Coulibaly, who I don't know much about, but someone suggests Masai-like player, super athletic. My thing is, what about they just took a non-Masai player one year who just can shoot the hell out of the ball? And honestly, this is a question I want to dig into further with our pal Rafael Barlow when we get him on the show to talk draft. Is the Raptors, have they been doing it backwards where they draft all these long limber dudes and are like, here, we're going to teach you how to shoot. Would it not maybe be easier to get guys who know how to shoot and play offense? Is it maybe more like a preternatural gift to be good at offense than it is at defense? And then you just teach the really good offensive player to play defense more effectively? I don't know if you can do that. Obviously, physical limitations come in and all that, but it seems like it's harder to teach a guy to learn how to be good at offense than it is to teach a guy to try hard at defense and know the scheme. So we'll get into that a whole other meatball another day. But
well, just quickly, I think at the very least, the Raptors have reached a point where they have enough of those guys on the roster.
You can stop hoarding them. Yeah.
And
it's Grandpa, you have enough newspapers from the 70s and 80s. You don't need to get more newspapers. You're good.
Yeah. And so now you need to find those guys who they don't seem like they're getting like their stomachs churning as they're putting up their 4th or 5th 3-point attempt.
Yeah.
It's just a normal thing for them to do.
I hear that. I think for me, this is fact, to go back to the question. I still think there's plenty to like about the top 6 players on the team. We'll talk about Gary Trent Jr., I'm not sure. And obviously the fit needs to be massaged. I'm willing to give it another year of Scotty Barnes getting better and Pascal Siakam, working on the catch and shoot part of his game to fully see if this is just a dead in the water. This is not going to work 5-man group. If you bring Fred back, you bring Yak back, you got OG, Siakam, Barnes. I think it would really stink if you just traded away Pascal and then all of a sudden he comes out and he's a 37% 3-point shooter. And it's like, well, damn, imagine we had that on the team, right? Like, that's totally on the table. Pascal adds stuff every year. I don't think Barnes is going to become a great 3-point shooter in the next couple years or anything like that. I think Pascal has it in him to do that at least. And I think his track record of always adding to his game makes me want to buy into the fact that that could be a thing that he does going into next season. And I wouldn't be stunned. And I think the returns of the starting five, as much as the fit's not ideal, I think the returns of the starting five in the last 25, 26 games are encouraging. If we're talking major roster moves, like, I do think a full overhaul of the bench is needed if you are going to keep your core players around, right? Like, there has to be more guard play off the bench. There has to be shooting in buckets, just buckets of shooting, overflowing with shooting. Oh my goodness, how do I hold all this shooting in my arms type of stuff? They have to go, and it's not going to be one summer, but you draft someone who can shoot the hell out of the ball in the draft at 13. That's job number one. You flip one of Precious or Chris Boucher for someone who's a little more shooting oriented to a team that might need their brand of, power forward play. Then maybe that's a way you balance it out a little bit more. Gary Trent Jr. obviously is a big question in all this as well. He is not a perfect player. A lot of people don't want him back. You don't bring him back. That's a lot of shooting. You're just letting walk out the door for nothing. How do you address that? It might not be possible to build a roster with enough shooting without a massive adjustment with the core. I'm not ready to say that you can't do it yet. I think I would probably wait to see into next season, if Pascal has added that to his bag a little bit. He's added the mid-range, like he's extended his range out further and further every year. I feel like that's on the table for him very much, but it's fact with a lot of contingencies, I suppose, is how I would answer this one. We're going to come back on the other side, Big V, get into the last two factor fictions. We're going to talk Nick Nurse, his comments. Did it cost him his job or not? And one last one that I'm just going to leave as a surprise for Big V and the listeners as well. We'll get to that in just one sec. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. If you are the type of person who loves a sports sim video game, this is the game for you. All you got to do is download Ultimate Pro Basketball GM from the App Store and get into playing. And you're dealing with challenging personalities. You're hiring players and coaches. You're hiring the right assistants. You're trading. You're training players. You're making draft picks. And you're navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all the ups and downs that come with running a team for multiple seasons. You have the whims of angry owners to be worried about as well. Very realistic, super fun, realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Raptors listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store, so make sure to go check it out. To download the game, just visit Pro Basketball GM, scan the code that you see on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube, or go look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, we round out the show here. Our final two factor fictions with Vivek Jacob of Raptors.com. Let's dive in. Number one, factor fiction, Big V. Per Masai Ujiri, Nick Nurse's comments in Philly had no bearing on the decision to let him go. Do you buy that, or was this the death knell for Nick Nurse's time in Toronto?
I don't think it had anything. I mean, I think it had something to do with it. I don't think it played zero factor at all. I think there was enough that happened beforehand to suggest that they were going down this path. But I think those comments in Philly kind of showed me that there was a guy who had one foot out the door.
Yeah.
And so that combination of, okay, like we're not feeling great about this, and he seems like he doesn't want to be a part of this. That was when to me, that's how I took it. And so while, Masai can probably list like 5 other things before he gets to that, maybe 10 other things before he gets to that. I do think that was like, when you look at what they talk about with meeting over the past week before that decision was announced, I struggle to believe that Masai was speaking with someone who was genuinely like, hey, I absolutely love this situation. I want to be here for the next 5 years, whatever it is, and be fully committed.
Yeah. This is a tough one because we obviously don't know the internal workings of the decision-making machine in the Raptors front office. My hunch here is to actually kind of say this is fact, just because it feels like the noise about Nurse was out long before those Philly comments. I mean, they were what, like 78 games into the season when that happened. It's not like the last 4 games and the outcome of the play-in. Maybe you could say that they, drifted through the last week, and that was because they were mad at their coach because he had checked out on the team. I think it was more sort of this team was busted pretty tangibly regardless. And I feel like the noise starting to sprinkle out in March suggests that maybe the Nurse comments weren't like the death knell, but more just sort of the acceptance of a thing he already knew was coming as well.
Right.
You can read it a whole bunch of different ways, but I'm inclined to think that the Raptors weren't making this decision down to the last week. He did go to quiet quitting mode. Good for him.
Except he was pretty loud.
Yeah, very loud until he was asked about his own self-imposed comments that he wasn't asked to make, and then was real quiet about that. In an abrasive fashion. We love you, Lindsey Dunn. But boy, yeah, it was time. I'm ready for a new guy. Let's go to the last one here. Fact or fiction, Big V. This is a surprise for you. Masai Ujiri uses this for Frayne a lot. We will win in Toronto. We will win again in Toronto. Fact or fiction, Big V. The Raptors, as we know them, under the leadership of Masai Ujiri, will win again in Toronto. You can use this. You can use the term win to mean all sorts of things. Championship, regular deep playoff runs, whatever you want. Fact or fiction, the Raptors will win again in Toronto. This is more of a big picture look at your confidence, I suppose, in those at the helm of the franchise. What you got?
In terms of win in Toronto, I take that as winning a championship. Take that to mean winning a championship. And so I think I just don't know that Masai will be in his role long enough for Toronto to win the next one. And so I will go with fiction.
Interesting. Statistically speaking, that's the right answer. It's very hard to win a championship. And if you are going as we will win a championship again in Toronto, I think fiction is probably it, because the odds are hilariously stacked against anybody winning a championship, let alone one specific team that is currently not really in the championship conversation. I think, the idea of it taking some time, certainly, is valid as well. Like, they're probably not going to fix this in 1 year or sort of get back to the heights they want to be at in 1 year. I think there's a chance they fix it and kind of set the course right this summer and into next year, but that won't mean that they're going to go win a championship next year. I think as far as, like, if you're going to go with the more generous reading of this, like, I think the Raptors will get back to being a pretty regular, consistent playoff team. And that's because I think that's what the franchise's whole plan is about. I think that's what they're designed to do. And that's what their philosophy's been ever since they came in, is get into that conversation, be there every year, be relevant, be in the spot where you can take advantage when NBA weirdness reveals itself. And so I'd bet they get back to that spot. Saying they're going to go win a championship, that is too big for my britches at the moment, I would say. So I will say I agree that it's fiction, and if you're winning a championship, I do think they'll get back to something resembling regular competitiveness. I think the roster obviously needs some work. I also think there's a reason we all came into last season extremely optimistic and feeling good about things, is there is a lot to like here. I think a new coach can have a massive impact. I think, we'll have to see, but it's boy, what an exciting offseason, man. I part of me is like, this stinks. I wish the team I liked were being smarter and were more together and we're not, in so much limbo, but also it's kind of tight that we have all this stuff to talk about over the next few months, because it is going to be fascinating. Do you have any parting shots here, Big V, before we round out the show? I called you Big Fee, which is what you should be calling yourself when you pitch yourself to freelance outlets or something like that. Big Fee is here, but besides the point,
I'm gonna use
any
that.
last parting shots?
No, not really. I think we've covered most of it. So, you can follow my usual stuff at raptors.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Vivek Jacob.
Hell yeah. You can follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast for free, rate, review shows. Thank you so much to the everyday listeners. We love you so, so much. And if you're not an everyday listener, what are you doing? Get on in here. We're talking about this stuff all year, all season long, this off season long, I guess. So this very, very spicy meatball of an off season. We'll be digging into it every single day. We're back to player reviews tomorrow. We'll get into, I think Pascal Siakam is who we're going to dig into. So you have that to look forward to. It's interesting times. Join the Discord, please. It's a lot of fun. The link is in the description of the podcast, both in audio and video. Come hang out. We've got lots of folks in there. It's a rollicking good time. Big V's in there. Just being Big V, being smarter than me, all that good stuff. So please go support there. Also, make sure to make your second list of the day Locked On Leafs as the Buds play Game 4 tonight. Game 3 was as stressed as I've been watching sports in a long time, and I look forward to Game 4 as well. Mike and Dave doing a wonderful job breaking down the Buds in the playoffs over on Locked On Leafs. And with that, we'll leave you there. Thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Pascal Siakam, unless some other massive news befalls the Raptors. Till then, thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.